Well, good morning. My name is Jessica McCall, and I'm from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I am obviously not there with you this morning, and I need to apologize. After having been in Baltimore for several days, my kids were not getting any better. They are sick, like so many people are these days, and my partner was sick as well. And so I really felt like I was needed at home a bit more to help with everyone. So I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of this conversation, and I look forward to hearing about the ideas that are taking place this morning. I really just wanted to share a little bit about mental health with you today, since this is definitely one of the sort of student needs and issues of inclusion that we are certainly facing in our current society. So first, very quickly, an overview of UNCG. It is a mid-sized public university with about 20,000 students in the Southeast. We are known to be quite diverse. We are the most diverse in the UNC system. And of course, with that comes all types of diversity. We actually have a higher average of students with anxiety, depression, considering suicide, than the national average, which we'll look at in just a minute. Our basic course is a combo course, just like many of yours. We have public speaking, interpersonal, and group communication in that course. It's approximately 50 sections per semester, 25 students per class, about more than 2,500 per year, not required, but taken by about 85% of the students at UNCG. So quick mental health overview. I know you've heard a lot about this in several of the presentations I attended in Baltimore before I had to leave. We knew this was an ongoing challenge for us at this point. Counselors will say the same thing. We do know that a lot of these stats you'll see 80s, in the 80s, in the 60s, thinking about anxiety, loneliness, sadness. We do know that these states of being are affecting the academic performance. So if you'll look at the second section here, it says students reporting academic impact as a result of anxiety, 28%. As a result of depression, 20%. As a result of stress, 34%. And so this is coming from the National Health College Assessment, and that was done in spring of 2019. We also know that in many cases, specifically with sort of reported students reporting anxiety through university offices, that those numbers are much lower than likely reality because many of our students are not registering with disability and or accommodation or resource offices. So certainly something to be aware of. So at UNCG, we are seeing really, I'm seeing three major challenges at this point concerning mental health. One are just the students who present as being anxious and or depressed or in distress. And we are probably most accustomed to seeing these students, but these are not the students who are just presenting with basic speaking anxiety. That's not really what we're talking about here. And Cherie Simons and John Hooker do a great job of talking about that in their 2018 article that I will reference a little bit later. But this is a different type of anxiety. Some of the students are aware of the situation and then they will come and tell you about that. Others are not aware at all. So they may present as angry, they may be apathetic, and those are a bit more challenging to really unpack. We're also seeing a different situation, and those are students who it's not just that they're struggling overall, they are unable to complete certain assignments within the class. So they might come to us and they say, you know, due to my mental health challenges or my disabilities, I am unable to be in group settings. I am unable to stand in front of a classroom and give a speech. I am unable to talk with people in online spaces. So some of these are student initiated and some of them are actually restrictions from professionals. We've had actual doctor's notes that say this student should not be required to or allowed to participate in group settings. So this has been quite challenging, as you might understand, when thinking about how to meet the accommodations reasonably, but then also meet the student learning objectives. And then last but not least, another challenge we're seeing, sort of a secondary effect, is that students are desiring and needing extensive time and relationships with instructors. Like many of you, we are using lecturers and graduate teaching assistants to teach the majority of our basic communication courses. And this is quite stressful for them. Sort of the secondary trauma that they're seeing is is evident. And so it's very time consuming to work with some of these students. They often will come into the office with a GTA and sit for, an hour, 2 hours, where it's a constant situation where there's a student who's challenged by mental health who will be in the office almost every single day, either having a breakdown or just needing someone to talk to. So these are definitely things that we need to wrestle with. So I wanted to focus just for a second on some of the limitations. And I thought the University of Washington, if there's anybody there from University of Washington, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I thought the University of Washington did a great job of laying this all out. Of course, this is stemming from the 1997 psychiatric rehabilitation information. So some of the language is slightly dated in the way that we label it as a disability. But just good to be aware of all of the possible limitations of mental health challenges. So difficulty with medication side effects, environmental stimuli, concentration, stamina, time pressures, multiple tasks, interacting with others, which we know, fear of authority figures, responding to negative feedback, responding to change, which happens all the time, and just severe test anxiety. So thinking about what do we do about all of this, because it can be quite overwhelming, I think. Simonson Hooker that I mentioned earlier did a nice job of sort of laying out a couple of things that we can do. We know we can analyze our syllabus statements concerning disability, mental health, accommodation services. We did this a couple years ago at UNCG. Dr. Pete Kellett, who does a lot of work with disabilities research, actually had his class design a new statement for our syllabi. And it's much more inviting, actually asks students to talk a bit about some of their challenges with the class if they feel like it. Certainly not required, but it's not sort of a label like, hey, if you have to go here, go here. It's more of an invitation of we're an open space, we welcome you, and we want to get you the resources that you need. Other things that we know just from basic instructional communication and communication pedagogy, use of immediacy, community development, appropriate self-disclosure, and then also making sure that you are always identifying and encouraging support services at your university. So this is a great start. I just wanted to highlight very quickly our biggest challenges at UNCG, because you might be having some of the same things. One is how to handle excessive absences. So we honestly don't have a great answer for this right now. Our syllabus is like many others. It says you have X number of absences before your grade will be affected. We do actually expect students to contribute in the classroom. We do expect them to interact. We do think that their voice is an important part of the learning process. And all of these are questions that the Office of Civil Rights actually asks us to think about. So we do not have a good solution for absences right now. I will say that our university office, OR's Office of Accessibility and Resources, does want us to be a bit lenient if at all possible. The challenge there is where do you draw the line? We've done everything from having students Skype in to having meetings later, etc. But the absence issue is definitely a challenge. The second one is how to determine if reasonable accommodations can be implemented. So that goes back to that thing I addressed earlier where I said, how do you actually have a student complete a course objective that requires them to work in a group when they are not allowed or able to work in a group? And so I know there's have to be some good solutions out there. We just haven't really found those. And then last but not least, I think I addressed this a bit ago, but how do we maintain instructor mental health? Secondary trauma. So that is definitely something that we want to continue to consider. Questions that I would love for us to continue to play around with is what is our ethical obligation to gain mental health training to ensure consistent and professional help from faculty in the basic course. One thing that I am doing as a basic course director is I'm going to be participating in mental health first aid in December. I'm going to have that program offered to all of our instructors because I think it is very important for us right now. But I am wondering about our ethical obligation to gain more education, continuing education. And then what impact are these mental health challenges having on our instructors and our GTAs who are primarily teaching the basic course? I'd love you all to discuss that and see what we might be able to come up with. And then how do we balance these ethical and legal responsibilities to mental health needs with our student learning outcomes and the goals of the discipline? So thank you so much. Again, I would love to be there to kind of hear some of the discussion and play off of the different ideas. Just a couple of quick references I would recommend. Brown has a great article in the Journal of Mental Health from 2018. I love the title, Student Mental Health, Some Answers and More Questions. Of course, Goldman has a 2018 article in Communication Education, and then Simons and Hooker also in Communication Education. And there are many, many more out there. So thank you so much for listening to my ideas today, and I wish you a fabulous remainder of the conference, and I will look forward to hearing from you. Take care.